Good morning. I'm Dusky Cherry, President of ITC Midwest. For the third straight year, we are pleased to be the presenting sponsor for the Iowa Ideas Conference and extraordinarily proud of our partnership with the Gazette. As an electric transmission company serving 2/3 of the state, ITC Midwest is invested in and has a very real stake in the future of Iowa. We've supported this conference since its inception because we embrace its mission of gathering hundreds of Iowans together to explore the key questions and the big ideas that will shape the future of our state. ITC Midwest was formed in 2007 to improve electric transmission reliability and increase transmission system capacity in Iowa. And we followed through on that commitment with more than $4.1 billion in capital investments to date. Our investments in the system not only serve the changing needs of customers, they also provide additional capacities to support economic growth and development of low-cost renewable energy resources. Our investments have resulted in a 62% drop in transmission-related outages since ITC acquired the system and began operating it. From extreme weather events such as last year's derecho to the unprecedented transition to renewable energy, from the rapid adoption of electric vehicles to the increasing focus on energy system resilience, the electric utility industry is suddenly in the national spotlight. All of these forces reinforce the critical role of the transmission grid to support the changing landscape and ensure consumers have access to low-cost, clean, and reliable electricity. You know, we often talk about here at ITC about the power of connection, meaning connections are needed to deliver power to communities. There's also tremendous power when people connect to solve problems. Over the next couple of days, I hope you will engage in the breakout sessions, speak up during discussions, and share your ideas to create a brighter future. Open your mind to different points of view as we all work together to come up with the best solutions for making Iowa an even better place now and in the future. I want to thank you for your participation to help shape the future and wish you a great conference.
Welcome to the 2021 Iowa Ideas Conference. Whether you've been with us all day or just arriving for this panel, we're glad you're here. This discussion is on energy storage and the rise of solar energy. It's part of our energy and environment track for Iowa Ideas. My name is Erin Jordan. I'm a reporter for the Gazette, and I've worked on many energy environment stories for the newspaper and for Iowa Ideas magazine, and I will be the moderator for today's discussion. Just as a note, I am also moderating Pints and Politics, which is at 6 p.m. at Millstream Brewery in Amana. So we're gonna wrap up here just maybe a few minutes early at 5:15. And just a reminder, the audience, we welcome questions. You can submit those through Whova, and we have one question already in the hopper, so we'll integrate that into our conversation as we move along. So we have a great panel lined up. I've asked each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their connection to the topic. So let's go alphabetically and start with Becky.
Thanks very much for having me on the panel, and welcome to everybody. Thanks for so late in the day being here with us. Yes, I'm Becky Saglin. I'm Sustainability Coordinator for Johnson County. I've been with the county since 2012, and working on energy and renewables is just one of several sustainability responsibilities I have. I was involved in helping the county add solar to its facilities beginning in 2015. I see Mike Carberry is on here. He at the time was involved with that, helping us get going on that. And we also have worked with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association and local partners on solar group buys. And we are a SolSmart community, which relates to ours having improved some of our permitting processes to make it easier to get solar. And most recently, I led Johnson County's ordinance update on utility scale solar, and we also added a battery energy storage system ordinance. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Derek?
Yes, I'm Derek Wagner with Alliant Energy. I'm our manager of distributed generation and power quality for our customer interconnection processes. But I'm also part of our engineering solutions team piloting new projects as well too. And some of those are our battery projects, our energy storage projects. And one of those I'll be talking about later is our Decorah battery project. So we're trying to deploy batteries to learn how we can use those in the future, to understand how to actually operate them and how we can do them safely and cost effectively.
Great. Zhaoyu?
Hello, everyone. My name is Zhaoyu Wang. So I'm an associate professor at Iowa State University. I'm affiliated with the Power and Energy Group in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering here. Actually, today I'm replacing a previous speaker, Ann Kimber. She has some conflict and cannot attend this meeting. She is the director of the Electric Power Research Center at Iowa State University, and we work together. So here at Iowa State, we offer a wide range of undergraduate and graduate courses in power and energy areas, also including the energy storage, renewable energy courses, and we do a lot of research on all these topics. And our sponsors for research includes Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, Iowa Energy Center, and local utilities. So we have a lot of collaborators here at Iowa, and especially our Electric Power Research Center, which is directed by Ann Kimber, like I introduced before. So that center has multiple industry partners, including like Mid-America Energy, Alliant Energy, and some other utility companies, also MISO, Midwest Independent System Operator, so we also do research for the center partners and collaborators. So that's just a brief introduction to the group, and I look forward to discussing with you on this very interesting and popular topic.
Thank you so much, panelists, for taking time to join us. Just to start off, renewable energy, including solar and wind, are growing across Iowa, both at the utility scale and in residential solar. But because energy needs ebb and flow, there's a need to store that renewable energy when there's a surplus for times when there's not. So we're going to talk about some energy storage options and find out from the panelists how Iowans are using solar energy and storage. So in February, a winter storm swept across Texas, causing the power to go out for more than 4 million people. Their state and local utilities were criticized for not being ready. I just wanted to put it out there to all the panelists, if you could explain how energy storage helps improve resilience in the face of weather emergencies.
Yeah, this is
go
Derek.
first. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start. One thing that we kind of try to review that situation ourselves of how could we plan for that, right? And just focusing on energy storage, since this is that panel we're talking about, is what we were thinking is we could use those to anticipate an event like that, to have them prepared, and then to discharge them and manage them during those events to try and help, with the energy need during those times as well too. So it's, managing them of anticipating that actually coming, getting them charged up, and then discharging them at the right rates and durations to maximize our energy usage during those times as well too. So that's what we were kind of thinking with our large energy storage systems, of trying to utilize those to minimize the impact to the distribution system.
I think Derek has captured there the main ways that storage would help. And I think it's also important to note that in the Texas situation, they are, in a sense, isolated. They are their own entire grid. So that was a big part of what happened down there, was that they could not call upon other parts of the system to assist them. And their plants were simply not winterized. So while storage could be something that's beneficial, there were many other things that play in what happened in Texas.
Yeah, I think energy storage is definitely very, very important and useful for enhancing the grid resilience. So probably know that there are utility scale energy storage and also the residential scale, which is much smaller, and they have different applications and usefulness in terms of enhancing the grid resilience. Let's give you an example. For the residential level, small size energy storage. Of course, when there's a major event and there's no energy supply, power supply from the utility grid, the home can be isolated from the grid and just run by itself using the renewable energy together with the energy storage. You don't want to supply the electricity to your home just by using solar. The reason is it's highly volatile, right? So it's changing time by time. So you do need energy storage to stabilize that supply. So that's also that's very important. And for the utility scale energy storage, it's very useful for the black start. You're probably wondering what's black start. So that means when the whole system is shut down, you need some power sources to help you to restart. So it's not restart automatically. You need some power sources to help you. So energy storage would be an ideal source for that. And also, we have quickly increasing penetration of renewable energy, including wind and solar. So we know that most likely these renewable energy resources will have to be disconnected from the grid when there is a major event. And they need to reconnect after the problem is solved. But that's actually a waste of resources. The reason is that probably you still have the sunshine, you still have the strong wind, right? You can still use the renewable energy sources to provide the emergency power supply, but it has to be shut down because of you lost major grid. So together, but if you pair the energy storage with these renewable resources, then that's a different story. They probably don't have to be shut down during the major events. So we actually unleash another potential for the renewable energy to provide more resiliency to the power grid. So that's another aspect. And also, some of you may have heard a microgrid, a concept called microgrid. So what's that? Microgrid is a small-scale power system with renewable energy and energy storage. And one major advantage or uniqueness for microgrid is it can be connected to the utility grid or disconnected and run by itself. But
okay, I wanted to just, before we get
yeah.
too far into microgrids, I want to just because we might want to save that for later on in the conversation.
No problem.
But those are all just really good points about the ways that storage can be used at in large scale projects and in smaller projects too. Derek, I was hoping you could talk with us about Alliant's energy storage pilot project in Decorah, which is an area that does have a lot of individuals trying to add renewable energy.
Yes. So Alliant Energy, we just did a battery project up in Decorah, Iowa this year. And so our battery size up there, it's a 2.5 megawatt battery system, which a 2.9 megawatt hour system. So it's about a 1.25 hour duration battery system up there. And the purpose up there is we have customer owned generation that's up there, and it's already about almost 4 megawatts on one distribution feeder. So for us, that is a lot. It's over generation. And so what we're trying to do with our battery is to increase the hosting capacity, the amount of additional customer owned systems that could interconnect to that circuit, is by having this battery kind of control the voltage up there. So that's what we've seen is most of the time it's the voltage fluctuations due to the intermittency of solar and wind. And so the battery up there is going to try and control the voltages for us using reactive power. But we'll also we'll run a test phase where it charges during the typical high peak solar production times, and then discharge later, at night or other times when we might need it as well too. So that's the quick rundown of our Decorah battery project that we partnered with the Department of Energy, Iowa State University, and the Iowa Economic Development Authority, all researching this type of project and how it could be used in the future as well too.
That's great. And I know that probably hope to learn a lot from it and see how you can do other storage projects in the future.
Yes.
Yeah. Becky, I've heard that I live in Iowa City, and I've heard at least some residential customers are adding not just solar panels to their roofs, but their own batteries to store energy they create. I wondered if you could talk with us about how common you think this is in Johnson County, and then how much more it might add to the costs of solar.
Sure. So I tried to get some figures for some of the towns, and I apologize I was not able to get those in time. So I do know the numbers for Johnson County, and they are kind of interesting. So again, that would be for the unincorporated area where the population is about 20,000. And we really had a big jump. So we have records for, let's say there's roughly about 12 installs of residential batteries, and the vast majority, about 9 of them, happened in just the last 9 to 12 months. So you can see there was a shift. I don't know if some of that was inspiration, so to speak, from the Duray show, or folks were sort of planning this along the way. But most of them already had the solar. They weren't installing them concurrently. They'd gotten solar, say, 2 or 3 years ago, and they were then adding the battery. So the battery cost has just, come down to be more affordable. It is still something that is a big purchase. I hesitate to give an exact dollar figure because, as with solar array installs, it really varies based on how big your household is. Just as a household solar array might vary from like a very small one at 2 or 3 kilowatts to up to 9, 10 kilowatts. You can see there's a 5-fold difference there. So it might really depend on what a household's expectations are. Do they have an electric vehicle? That will affect how much they want to install. But usually you're getting into the 5 figures. You're going to be, if you're installing just your basic, something to charge an electric vehicle, and you want some storage for it, you're looking at about at least $10,000, kind of going up from there.
Okay, that's good to know. We got a question from one of our audience members kind of along that line. Let's see here, I'm trying to get to it. Kind of talking about, this individual says, I purchased solar in 2019 when the tax credits were still advantageous. How do we get homeowners to invest in energy when state and national governments do not incentivize it? Do we have, are there plans in the infrastructure package, or what do you guys think about that?
I can
This
jump
is
in.
Derek.
Oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Derek.
go ahead, Becky. Okay, I'll go. I still think there's some federal tax incentives, right? And I think that they're trying to open those up to energy storage systems as well too, which may not be accessible to like residential customers. I'll have to double check on that, but I know there's some federal incentives, and they're trying to open up energy storage with that. And then I know that the state of Iowa, I thought still had some state incentives around solar. I think that there's so much demand for those that those kind of run out pretty quickly each year, right? There's such a high demand that it just kind of runs out pretty quick as well too.
That's good. The solar tax credit for Iowa was so oversubscribed that I think you would have had to get your panels in by very early in this year. And so people who are installing them right now, they are not going to be able to benefit from the state tax credit. And I know there's been some discussion at the state level of decoupling the state credit from the federal credit. And again, this is mostly for solar panels, but it could be something expanded for batteries. And because by definition, the state credit is half of whatever the federal is. And so there's been some push to decouple those and to fund it at a higher amount. I think it was funded at, was it 2 or 3 million? And that's what was already oversubscribed. And I know there's been a request to have it be at least 5 million annually. That's again, just for the solar panels. So how much you would need to put in for batteries. And there's also, an equity issue of, again, the battery storage right now is something that I believe is really for your higher income households.
Okay. And we may get into that, into residential solar a little more later as well, but Alliance project in Decorah is with the lithium ion batteries. Zhaoyu, what alternatives are there to lithium ion, and which is expensive, and they can't be recharged. You've got a disposal issue. What are the alternatives out there? Hold on, I think we need to unmute you. Kat, our room monitor, if you're out there, can you unmute Zhaoyu? She says to try again. See if you can unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay, works. I don't know what happened, but it's accidentally muted. Sorry about that.
No.
So there are some alternatives. Well, depending on the size and the applications for sure. We have, for example, large size, we have flow battery, very simple structure and also cheaper. But all of these are just under development. Even for lithium-ion battery is still under development, right? So it's still not ideal. The problem with all this technology, firstly, is energy density. How much energy can be saved within a limited size of materials. Secondly, is a cost. Thirdly, is a life. And there may be another issue that it's not a big concern now, but will be a big concern for the future. That's how to recycle different materials. So that's also an important issue. So that's 4 issues I think are most important for all the battery technologies, no matter what they are. Till now, I think lithium-ion battery is still the most, I would not say most used, maybe the most popular, one of the most popular technologies on the market.
What about the green hydrogen? I know that there's a cost to that, and do you think, is Iowa a good place to produce and use hydrogen as battery or as energy storage? And if when do you think that sort of technology might be ready?
Well, that's definitely a very good solution, and it's a different kind of battery storage, right? So it's not a traditional battery, I think Iowa is in an ideal position for the hydrogen because of our location, because of our products here, and also hydrogen is will be very useful in the future for let's say heavy industry like heavy trucking, school bus, this kind of large vehicles and industry usage. So because of their cost and because of their their energy density, so and how easy you can produce hydrogen. So I think it's a very, very promising solution, at least for the state of Iowa. Yeah.
This is probably a question for people like me who don't quite understand, but could you explain how hydrogen is used to store energy?
Well, hydrogen itself, it's not storing the energy. It's mostly you use energy to produce hydrogen, right? So it's more like serving as an intermediate between the original source of energy and the electricity. So you use some energy, let's say some electricity to produce hydrogen, and then after that, usually minimum energy to produce hydrogen, and then after that, when you want to use hydrogen, you can think it this way: you just burn it. It's something like you burn it, but the product will only be water, so there's no pollution, and it's a good way of store extra energy. When you have extra energy, you produce hydrogen. And I can give you another example. For example, a very traditional way of store energy is before even we have the battery, is hydropower, right? You build the dam, and then sometimes you raise the water level, and when you need more electricity, you reduce the water level, and it produce electricity. Similar mechanism. So you use extra energy to produce that and use it for the future. Yeah.
It makes me think of, chopping firewood when you've got time, and then that firewood is there for you when you need to have a fire in the winter.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And but there's a major difference is that firewood will give you pollution, but this one will not.
Right. That's a big difference. Derek, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of when you were asking is I think of like hydrogen fuel cells, right? That's how hydrogen could kind of be part of like the storage as well too. But just from like a traditional utility mindset as well too, is we can use hydrogen, instead of natural gas, right? Or combined with natural gas, right? So you still have our traditional generators, but now it's burning hydrogen instead of a natural gas as well too. So that's how we're kind of evaluating how hydrogen plays, is kind of fuel cells, but also in the combustion side of things as well too. And you could also pump it and store the hydrogen, and then just pump the gas as the combustion as you need it. So that's how it comes into this energy storage, is you could store the gas, use it when you need it as well too.
So what are the hurdles still with that? And do you guys have a sense of when it might be something that could be used?
So I'll go first. I think it's the cost to, like what Zhaoyu said, is the cost to produce the hydrogen. I think when that starts to compete with the other fuel types, like natural gas, I think that's when is one of those drivers, is when can it compete with that? Because there's a cost to produce the hydrogen as well too, with that. So that's, to me, that key is when can that production cost get close to other fuel types with it as well too. I think Zhaoyu's trying to say something again, but I think the hydrogen technology is here, to actually use it, to burn it as well too. It's just we could kind of convert some of our systems as well too. So I don't think hydrogen's a new concept that we need to research a whole bunch. It's just, can we refine the methods to produce it, more efficiently and cost effectively?
Yeah, that makes sense. Kat said, go ahead and try to unmute yourself again.
I'm sorry, I kept got muted. I'm sorry what happened. So
we all get in the habit of that, because when we're usually on Zooms, we mute ourselves when we're not talking. So don't feel bad at all.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I just want to add to Derek, and his point is a very good point. So I think for hydrogen, how to we know how to produce it. It's not difficult to produce it, and we know how to use it. But the problem is how to store it safely and how to transport it. Let's say you probably know that Toyota has a fuel cell vehicle called Mirai, if I remember the name correctly. And the problem with this vehicle is that, well, it's perfect because it's once it's refilled, it can run for a very long distance and very cheap to refill. But the problem is that there's no station to refill. So that's a big problem for the future. If you want to broaden the application of hydrogen, how to store it and how to transport it, how to deliver it to the customer, is the biggest concern, I think.
Okay, that makes sense. Just shifting gears a little bit, we need to ramp up the use of renewable energy quickly to meet goals for reducing the effects of climate change. But there are hurdles to that. Derek, could you tell us a little bit about the regulatory environment for bringing new projects online and what it's like to kind of get started and the timeline for some of those?
Yeah, some of these like new technologies, right? It's kind of tough to get through the, like, I'll say permitting process, maybe one of them, with some of these, like our energy storage, it's working with the local fire departments, the chemistries of those batteries, and what kind of permits you might need as well too. So I think with some of these newer technologies, and I'm focused on the energy storage, is there, what kind of steps do you need to go through? Sometimes it's an education with the local jurisdictions, local officials and fire departments to kind of, hey, what do we need to do here with it as well too. So that's one of those barriers, is there's not a clear, here's exactly what you need to do, because we've done it a whole bunch and the technology keeps changing. Where for batteries, it's, even the chemistry of your lithium ion battery changes some of those requirements as well too. So I think kind of going through that regulatory permitting process, and then the safety side of things of setbacks, and it's a new to a community as well too, kind of walking them through some of the precautions we're taking and the things we're considering as well too. So it is a little bit slower of a process, where hopefully as we get more experiences with these, that we'll be able to kind of move these along as well too.
And I understand there's quite a lag time for approval through MISO, right? What, like 2 years or more? Or
yes. So in the MISO footprint, right, is there's a queue process, and yeah, that's about a 2 to 3 year, like you said, kind of process as well too. We're fortunate as a distribution company, is we could do some things on our distribution system, and that's what we've been trying to do with our pilots, right? Is we can do those a little bit faster, where we can kind of put them where we want to put them, where we know there's not going to be impacts as well too. But then if we wanted to go big and do it, that's when we would need to get in the MISO queue to do some of those. So that's where we're fortunate we can pilot some of these and learn about them on the distribution system. That way, when we go big, we have more confidence in how to operate them, the financials, the economics, how to use them as well too.
any thoughts from the panel about how to make that process more nimble? I don't know if there have been any things discussed out in the energy world about that.
Here in Johnson County, appreciate what Derek was saying about their working with their fire department, and I don't know if it's a little too soon to delve a little bit into the fact that we have adopted this battery energy storage system ordinance, but it is addressing some of those issues from the local government point of view. Obviously, we don't have a say when it's so large that you're getting MISO involved. That's separate from us, but we are trying to use some model language actually that came from New York State. So we know it was vetted by lots of folks, and we were looking at these considerations that Derek's alluded to, so that you have an operations and maintenance plan, a safety plan, an emergency plan that's actually separate from that, decommissioning, to actually back up in terms of even installing these things, that maybe there's going to be some kind of roads agreement if there's, because batteries are actually pretty heavy. When you think of some of our counties, our rural counties, what are the bridges like? So we're trying to use something so that it hopefully would not be vastly different from something used in another state, and maybe over time could be similar across the county. So we appreciate utilities are dealing with 99 counties, and that there's, ideally there might be some consistency, but still local jurisdictions should have, an ability to know what's right for their particulars.
So Aaron, I'll maybe talk about the MISO. We've talked with MISO of, is there a way to streamline that process? Is there, but I kind of, I'm from the utility side of, I do see why it takes a little bit of time, and I'll tie it back to your resiliency discussion at the beginning, is MISO's taking that time to study the reliability of our region, right? So that's where they're taking that time to, there's all these requests that are in, they're trying to understand if all these happened, are we still going to have a good balanced supply and demand in this region as well too? And they're looking at natural events as well too. So it's one of those, I get why it takes some time. Like all of us, we're trying to say, can you do it faster, but understand why it takes a little bit of time. We don't want them just to let everything go through and not be studying that reliability and resiliency for our region.
Right. Yeah, it's that desire to make sure everything is thought out and done, thoughtfully but also with the sense that we have this urgency too. I this week listened into a meeting for the new carbon capture pipeline, and just, they have to have a hearing in every county where the pipeline will run, and then they it's just, there's so many steps built into it, and in part so people can, you make sure everyone's voices are heard. So I don't know, that's probably a factor as well.
And Erin, could I just throw in, I don't know if we really defined what MISO is, or folks who aren't familiar, is that, as I understand it, it's basically this nonprofit. They are the air controllers of a 15-state region, plus I think it includes Manitoba, or part of Manitoba. And so it's about 42 million folks are, getting their energy within the system. And so they're just making sure we get the right amount of electricity delivered to us, day in, day out. And that's why they have, if a big load is added, or things are going to be onloaded and offloaded, they're concerned about, because it can affect this very large integrated system.
Yeah, that's a good explainer, Becky. Thank you. There has been some opposition to the large scale solar installments, some of them in Iowa, and even some mid-sized ones, in Johnson County and other places. A question, I have a couple of questions, and one from me and one from the audience member. Is there a way we can make these large scale installments more appealing, to people, and educate Iowans about the need? How do we do those two things?
Is it okay if I kind of jump in on some of this?
Sure.
So one thing I guess to point out is sometimes when large scale can, in some people's mind, be really relative. So a 2 megawatt array in it is not really that big. That's a big difference. We're talking about a 2 megawatt array and a 100 or 150. So in a utility scale is anything, it can be something that's just 2 megawatts, but the really large ones, they're going to be like 75, 100, 150 megawatts. They're going to be really large and take up hundreds of acres. A 2 megawatt array, which I think you were alluding to, Erin, that was the one in Iowa City that the people of Iowa City, there was some concern about it being installed at the waterworks part because of views, because it was going to be on a piece of property that had been put into wildflowers or native vegetation. And that was 2 megawatts, and roughly, I think that would have taken up about 12 acres or so. It's usually about 5 to 10 acres per megawatt of solar. So I guess, I want to kind of make that distinction between these. They're still utility scale, but they're relatively small, and something that is, 75 times as large. So there was a concern about that in Iowa City. Again, I work for Johnson County, so we don't have jurisdiction over that. And essentially that project found a home in the unincorporated area. That was a Mid-American project, and they later approached us, and they actually put it on some of their own land. And we have a utility scale ordinance, so there was a balance there of what needed to be done in terms of screening. Sometimes that's a concern, right? So what the view shed is like. So with screening, you can alleviate some of those concerns. If a project goes through, a project here in Johnson County is going to go through a number of reviews. If it's utility scale, and it's going to need to meet several requirements. In addition, it goes through a complete environmental review. So there's lots of ways that concerns and the practicalities can be addressed. I hope that addresses partly of what you're asking.
Yeah, I'll go next. Some things that we've done, so we don't always do it, is some of our solar projects, we'll try and engage the community and kind of talk through some of those. So one of our solar projects, we actually put in an information hub. And so it displays stats and tries to use it as an educational or learning portal for people. And it's right next to a walking/biking trail. So we try to put it as part of the community. as well too. And so that's what we've done before, and it was just that location. The other thing that sometimes we look for is repurposing land that's not really suitable for other uses, like a brownfield site that, hey, it's maybe contaminated soils, that we're trying to repurpose that as well too. So for a community, it's not just this open, barren piece of land, that we can kind of beautify it up a little bit. And then we've even tried to do, like the prairie grass or the pollinators around some of our solar facilities as well too, just to kind of keep that environmental, aspect as well too. So there's always a give and take with that. But when you asked what could you do to spice up, that's what we've tried to do on some of ours as well too.
Zhaoyu, anything you wanted to add on that point?
Yeah. So I think it's important to educate people on the benefits of having energy storage and large scale or increasing penetration of solar. So I think it's also important to understand where the opposition come from. There are different parties involved in this process, and each one has its own position. But most likely, it's about cost benefit, just different aspects in cost benefit. So it's very important to analyze the cost benefit and then use the cost benefit numbers to educate people and let them know, okay, this really benefit us a lot more than it may cost us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that fits, it's a good segue to a question from an audience member. They asked, do you believe that the resistance to utility scale solar is organic and grassroots, or do you have any thoughts that it's maybe funded or organized by competing interests for renewable energy?
I think, Lynn County was the location where they had some contentious discussions, correct? And I think if you look at those, there's recordings of those information sessions that they had, which again were meant to be general, even though there was discussion about specific projects. Those were not hearings on those specific projects. But if you watch those, you see people came up as individuals. They expressed a wide variety of concerns. So I believe that a lot of it was, what I saw was, individuals coming up with something that was of concern to them. Obviously, there were some entities represented. The city of Palo has had some concerns, but that's what I've witnessed in watching those up in Lynn County. And I know their planning department, and sort of as Derek alluded to, how they go out into the community, they were looking at the different issues. And there's the financial cost benefits, and any project you can look at what the externalities are, negative and positive, who might be disproportionately impacted, and those kind of equity issues, they are important to consider. But sometimes in the recording of what happened up in Lynn County, you can see that many things were addressed up front by that planning department, and that some of the concerns were alleviated right away. Derek alluded to how if you do a pollinator planting underneath a solar array, that is one of the co-benefits. That's something I think Zhaoyu was referring to, where again, there's other benefits there in the aggregate. And so I can't speak to whether there are other type of efforts out by larger groups.
Another question from an audience member. They're wondering why we haven't seen more in Iowa arrays over parking lots like they've seen in some places. Is that a viable idea here, with like snow removal? I'm just not sure how that works in the Midwest.
My guess on that is we have so much surface parking, and Iowans are used to pulling out ice scrapers. I mean, that's just part of what that is, I think. It's very expensive.
Yeah, I'll go with, I think it's the cost right now, right, to build the structure, to put in that, the supports for those solar, I think is probably the main driver why we haven't seen it too much, as well too. And I think some of it also is we have in Iowa, we typically have more open space than some of those other areas, right? To where, hey, it's just cheaper to go there, maybe do a ground mount system. So that's my, if I had to guess, I think that's part of it as well too.
That makes sense. So in the cases where it would be in a parking lot, it's just above where the cars would go in? Is that how it works?
What we've seen is, if we already have just like an open parking spot, they'll build a structure, almost like a roof, and then you put the solar panels on that. So it's the cost to build that structure and then put the solar panels on top. I'll just think of like Cedar Rapids, right? We've got some of the parking ramps there. It probably only makes sense to put it on the top part of that parking ramp as well too. But most of those that I'm familiar with in Cedar Rapids, right, they're still open on the top. So you still need to build that, kind of structure to put the solar panels on as well too. Is what I've seen for a lot of those parking ones.
Wanted to just shift to what's happening in politics these days. The Senate has passed the $1 trillion infrastructure plan, and the House may vote on it soon. And there's the Build Back Better Act, which is not bipartisan at this point, includes some benefits for solar energy. Based on what's happened in the past with tax credits, how much do you think these incentives will help spur development? You want to go first, Derek, or?
Yeah, I can go first. I have a hope and optimization, I'm very optimistic that it'll, kind of push some research on some of these things as well too. Is what I'm hoping a lot of that funding does as well too. On just new technologies, maybe new efficient ways to process some of those materials. We haven't touched on it too much, but how do you recycle or reuse some of these energy storage systems as well too? Making that money available so we can research and kind of learn from some of those as well too. I know the funding will be to do projects themselves as well too. I think learnings from those can justify or help us point to, look, now we want to do that too as well too. But to me, I think it'll be more on that research side, and product development is where a lot of that will go.
And Zhaoyu, being at Iowa State, if some of those incentives came your way, what would you like to see research done on?
There's a lot of research areas we need to investigate more. Fundamentally, how you make the solar system more efficient, right? And how to reduce its cost. So that's about the material science, mechanical engineering, those part of those people doing that kind of research. And on our side, we want to do research, see, okay, how this solar integration will impact power grids, and how to address the concerns from the utility side in terms of how to operate, how to safely and reliably operate the system with a high penetration of solar. So that's a research from our side. So there are a lot of open questions. And recently, I just give you an example. Recently, we got a grant from Department of Energy. It's definitely not part of the bill, but it's doing research on solar reliability, how to do maintenance of solar system. Because you want to reduce the cost of solar system. You can reduce the production cost. You can reduce the manufacturing cost. You can also reduce the operation and maintenance cost by better maintaining it and reduce its failure rate, right? So this kind of research, there are a lot of questions we need to figure out about solar and energy storage.
Outside financial incentives, just speaking at, in terms of like tax breaks for individuals, what else motivates customers when it comes to residential solar?
I can speak a little bit to that. As some of you on this call may know, Johnson County has hosted 3 solar group buys. Lynn County has also hosted several. We're actually had just wrapped up one together across the 2 counties. And it is both the affordability that you actually, you will get savings on your electric bill. And also, of course, many people like the idea that they're contributing to a cleaner environment. Some folks just like newer technologies and trying something new. Nothing wrong with that. I do always still like to encourage, don't forget about the most basic way we can help the climate, which is just use less energy. And then if you're going to still need it, use an energy efficient appliance. That's just an important step not to forget before you start considering things like renewables and battery storage. But those are, and we do see a lot of evidence that someone, you see what your neighbor's doing. How often we see someone doing something, we might ask, hey, what's that? You see them making improvement to their home, and you ask about it. There is a lot of interest also in how renters can start to participate in this, because they're just as interested in saving money and contributing to a cleaner economy. So there's discussions on how that can happen on community solar, or getting solar onto buildings where there are a lot of renters. So I think people, despite our interconnected world, there's still just a lot of chatting on the street, and of course a positive way Facebook can make an influence is seeing a picture of an array at somebody's house. So those are, I think, several ways. And I mean, if anyone wants to know how a group buy works, when you want to consider one for your community, you're welcome to reach out to me separately, and I can tell you what the process was for us.
That's great.
So I think one thing that motivates at least me is I want to have uninterruptible power supply, especially during the winters and just hurricanes, this kind of extreme weather events. So I hope that solar can help me have this continuous power supply during the extreme events. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be quick. We've seen similar factors that you've seen, Becky, right? It's that, people trying to save money on their utility bills, that they did want to go green. They just want to be a part of that as well, too. It's good for the environment. So we've seen those as well, too. And like you said, we see some people that just like to tinker with the new technology, right? And some of these open up the door, the solar plus battery at your house, right? Is, hey, I can control it from my phone, right? So some people just like that. Hey, I just want to, like you said, play with it, learn. It's a new technology with it as well too. And Zhaoyu, like what you said, is some people are also, I think, putting in for that reliability, like a home energy storage of, hey, just in case if I have an outage, I still want power for my house, right? Is what we've seen as well too. So those are some of those factors. There's lots of factors, but those are some of the big ones we've seen.
Well, not to mention with COVID, many more people are working from home. And if you are trying to work online and you have deadlines and all these things happening, I could see your motivation to have uninterrupted power becomes even stronger.
And one thing just to be clear about for folks who have a solar array and obviously don't have storage, if there is a power outage, they are not going to be able to use their array. That is also down during that outage.
Right. Hence the reason, like we were talking about, maybe more installations, like you said, Becky, of people having a battery to, in addition to their solar. We just have a couple more minutes here, but a quick question, working one more question from our audience. Will substation level storage be added, and what criteria will determine the build out? I don't know if that's a question best for you, Derek.
Yes, that's one thing we're considering right now, right? Is I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did, right? I do think we will have substation level, energy storage build out. And I think some of that goes back to the resiliency and MISO as well too, but just having a flexible, distribution system. If we have the storage there, we can kind of manage it out that way as well too. You could build a more localized microgrid, right, as well too for transmission outages. So I do think substation level storage will be coming in the future, right? I don't know how widespread it will be, but that's one of those things that I'm curious about as well.
And the advantage of that would be you wouldn't maybe see an outage like citywide. It would be more like what would be an advantage of having that at the substation level?
At the substation level, so if there's like a transmission outage, you could maybe, that substation still has power, right? So that neighbor, I'll say it's more than a neighborhood, right? As if we're like in Cedar Rapids or Iowa City, be maybe a couple neighborhoods that would still have power then. So it kind of helps with the outages and reliability with that as well too. But then it allows us as a distribution company to manage our distribution system. So as we have like peak loading where we would maybe need to do upgrades, is you could use that battery to defer some of those upgrades as well too. Instead of us upgrading our substation transformer or equipment, you could use that to like lower that load by discharging that battery when you needed it as well too, and then charging it at the lower usage times as well too. So we could defer distribution upgrades, hopefully at that substation level.
Well, that's great to know. Well, unfortunately, we're just about out of time for today for our discussion of energy storage and the rise of solar. Thank you so much to our panelists, Derek Wagner of Alliant Energy, Zhaoyu Wang of Iowa State, and Becky Saglin of Johnson County. And thank you to our audience. Iowa Ideas continues tomorrow with some great sessions, including one at 8:30 about reducing gun violence in our communities. For those of you in Eastern Iowa, you're welcome to come out to Millstream tonight and join us for Pints and Politics. Otherwise, have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.